Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, a Pittsburgh Steelers podcast made by fans like you, for fans like you. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. I am your host, Joe Kuzma, and joined once again by my co-host, Brian Roach. Tell everyone hello, Brian.
Hello, everyone.
And hey, you get what you ask for sometimes. We need to talk about the rest of the NFL draft, at least the Steelers draft. I don't want to go through all of the day three that seems like it just lasted forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. It seemed that long to you?
I'm not sure it's not still going on.
Actually, that's the 2016 draft. It's still going too. But before it finishes, let's pause for another commercial. It's just, let me tell you this. I was in Pittsburgh Saturday. I went down the Heinz Field for the fan blitz, which was something in and of itself because we pull in, we were walking in, and I swear as soon as we hit the gates and we were undercover, like the heavens opened up, it started pouring. They were evacuating. That doesn't sound like a good word, but they were trying to get people off the field so they don't get struck by lightning or something, and it just stormed. So all the on-field activities were, pretty much put on a break. They kind of abandoned that, and it came back because the sun came back out. But anyways, made our way over to the club level so we could see Mandy Moore and the people from All of Us or This Is Us, or I don't know. I don't watch the show, actually. I feel kind of bad because I know it's set in Pittsburgh. My wife watches it. I'm just not into that sort of thing. But she announces the fourth-round pick, right? And they're about to do it. And there's actually somebody wrote an article, or this might have been in Pittsburgh Post-Gazette or something on Sunday, and they were talking about how they were nervous. They had like 30 seconds to remember the pick's name and make sure they get the pronunciation right. And everybody butchers this, by the way. I don't know. They go to say 2017 draft, and they end, or 207. What was so hard about saying 2017 or 2017? I think either sound okay, but it seemed like everybody wanted to do both. And they put Mandy on halt. They went to commercial, which we could see because there's all these television screens there. And they were talking about this in the article too, and I think she ended up having about 3 to 4 minutes of downtime. That's almost too much time to memorize Joshua Dobbs' name and actually maybe screw it up. I mean, it was insane.
Yeah, if that's how long you have to remember Joshua Dobbs, then that's an excessive amount of time. So you're going to end up being, Calvin and Hobbes, Freddie Dobbs, who knows?
Very true. And we're going to talk about Josh Dobbs because he's the first of a few picks that we did not get to talk about. And by the way, we're recharged finally, folks. I know it's taken us a while to come back around and talk draft, talk the day three, but those first 2 days, wow, put a beating on me. I had no sleep. I'm sure you felt the same way, Brian.
Absolutely. It was 2 long days in a row trying to get the pods in at the end of the day, and then still being kind of jazzed up from the whole process. It's not like you just settle down and go right to sleep. So, yeah, a couple long days.
And I'm still kind of catching up, but now that the batteries are charged, let's review a little bit. The Steelers' first-round draft pick, T.J. Watt. I just did an article. I did cheers and jeers. I don't like doing grading drafts because these guys haven't even played yet. I mean, imagine the guy who gave Senquez Golson an A, 2-3 drafts ago, and the guy still hasn't played a snap in the NFL. It seems kind of silly. So I have a thumbs up for this whole. I like this draft. I know some things seem a little wonky. We'll try and explain it a little bit. Some people feel maybe T.J. Watt a reach in the first round, or Juju Smith-Schuster, Cameron Sutton, James Conner. Oh, James Conner isn't a third rounder. Let's explain once again that myself and Brian, we've hammered this to death. Okay, the draft process, the Steelers, we keep saying that pick 30 is essentially like a second rounder. So if you took and just chopped the grades down, made them one less number here. So say TJ Watt was a second round pick. Say Juju Smith-Schuster was a third round pick. Say Cam Sutton and James Conner, especially James Conner, is a fourth round pick. Do you think you have better value when you say it in those terms? I think so.
Absolutely. The thing that we all don't ever really going to understand is how the Steelers really put together their board. And Kevin Colbert and Tomlin can talk about it. The media can ask questions. But the idea is that they are going to look both forwards and backwards, and they're going to decide based on the round that they're in. Some magic stew of numbers is going to tell them based on this round for this position and that we have this kind of need for, this is the best value, and that's what they're going to do. And I don't think I did read an article today that somebody thought they stretched, that they got cute at the end of the draft and tried to do what we would call luxury picks. I don't think that they did. I think they stick with their formula. And if this is the guy that fits their needs and their formula the best, that's where they go.
I like that perspective as far as a reach or trying to get cute. That was Ed Bichette, I believe, who was saying that. And I'm trying to pull up the past Steelers drafts, like the whole entire list here, because, you know, he said he was talking about Colin Holba, the long snapper in the 6th round, and he made a tweet which was kind of funny in a way. Notable 6th rounders: Antonio Brown, Vince Williams. And that's funny, okay? That is kind of funny. But last 2016 6th-round pick Travis Feeney, not with the team anymore. You have L.T. Walton and Anthony Chickillo. Those are pretty solid. Dan McCullers, Jordan Zumwalt. Well, Zumwalt never amounted to much of anything. McCullers, probably on the fence of he's probably going to play out this contract and we'll see and go from there. When Vince Williams was taken, somebody was selected in the 6th round before him. That was Justin Brown. Gone. Get out of here. They didn't have a 6th-round pick in 2012. You go to 2011, Keith Williams. Yeah, I don't remember him. Jonathan Dwyer and Antonio Brown. Dwyer had a cup of coffee. You had Rashawn Harris in 2009. So you see where I'm getting. You see exactly where I'm getting at here is you just don't know. It's a coin flip, and I don't necessarily jumping to Holba especially. I don't necessarily have a problem with going after something that could be considered a need. We'll swing back around to him in a second. T.J. Watt. I said the cheers and jeers on that. The only real jeers. Some people were thinking this is more a name recognition thing. Could that have elevated his status? He played 2 years. His big full season was last year with the Wisconsin Badgers. He had knee injuries. Terry Fletcher, our quote-unquote medical expert with a plethora is a good word, alphabet soup. Let's put it this way. You know what? I think of the SpaghettiOs that have the ABCs in them because I have a 3.5-year-old daughter right now who eats this garbage. And yes. And when you scoop that out, those are all the acronyms that show up after Terry's name. So she knows a wealth of people in this medical industry and people she could quote and draw from. And her first initial reaction wasn't the elation that myself or you had, Brian. She was more concerned that, hey, this guy blew out his knees, both knees, and more than once. And that had some credibility to it, too, because I didn't really think of it from that standpoint, but then there was an article that popped up. It may have been like Jacob Klinger or somebody of that nature, Chris Adamski. It was someone wrote and had this article, and they were talking about how his knee surgeries may have corrected that problem, but Terry's trying to say with knees, nothing is really a given. Now, it does help now when he almost went 3 years, an entire 3 years without playing football, and this is
right.
Where the jeers are. But he was a tight end. He was recruited as a tight end to Wisconsin, converted to playing on defense. Not getting hit now and doing the hitting should help protect him, but she's still saying if he cuts on the field, all the dynamic movement, things of that nature, might still be a concern. You got to hope that the Steelers did their due diligence with the medical thing. The other concern, of course, was we thought they did that with Ladarius Green, and then he missed most of last season.
Yeah, I mean, I bow down to Terry's knowledge without a doubt, but my idea is I think even a healthy knee is suspect because knees are just not built for professional football. There's been a lot of articles written about how the human knee is not designed to do what we ask it to do when we're playing professional football. So, while it is a concern, and Colbert did address it in the, their press conference afterwards, he said, we're aware of his injury history and we're fine. Which I'm with you 100%. I feel like I trust them to do their due diligence. and I have questions about what went on with Ladarius Green. I don't believe that the whole issue of holding him out had anything to do with his ankle. I still think it was probably concussion based, and I wonder what they did or didn't know about that. But I think for the most part, these guys are pretty solid in their evaluation of whether they think there's a real problem there or not.
And of the guys that were available, let's put it this way, TJ Watt right now is healthy. I liked him next to Derek Rivers. Derek Rivers from a smaller school playing smaller competition, just had some incredible measurables, a great Senior Bowl, a great combine. Still question marks there. That's why I said TJ Watt I felt could go ahead of him, and he did. Derek Rivers fell into the third round, of course, to that team to not be named. And then the other guys, I wasn't too hot on. Charles Harris, Carl Lawson was the one that was hurt, right?
And Harris already had gone, I think. Had he not? I think Harris had already been picked.
He may have. You may be right. I'll have to look at this list here. And then there was Takaris McKinley was the other one who went a pick or two later.
Atlanta traded up to get him, yeah.
So, let me find this real quick. Brian, TJ Watt, Taco Charlton was the one that went to the Cowboys. And I'm trying to remember where Harris went, and I'm not going to find it right now, but I believe you could. Oh, you know what? It was the Miami Dolphins at 22. So he was already off the board. So going into this, I already felt that the two I really wanted were TJ Watt and Derek Rivers. And you have question marks on either side of that. You have question marks with all these guys, Tack McKinley, Carl Lawson. So Lawson went in the fourth round to Cincinnati, correct? I think he fell that far. So there's question marks all the way around, and even if there aren't question marks, it doesn't mean they're going to pan out and be a dynamite pick. I'm absolutely cool with TJ Watt, first round overall. You jump to the second round, and a lot of people are complaining about taking another wide receiver, and I'm not so bent out of shape about this pick. Juju Smith-Schuster already looks like and is acclimating to the Pittsburgh culture.
Yeah, I want to say one more thing about TJ. Specifically, because the biggest whine that has gone out across the Steelers nation has been that Reuben Foster was there, and we were saying even at the time, there's a reason he's falling as far as he is. And they were saying it on the draft left and right. There's got to be a concern about his shoulder, and sure enough, he's got shoulder surgery scheduled now. So I just want everybody to realize Reuben Foster, wasn't the best fit for the Steelers to begin with because we didn't need another inside linebacker desperately. While if he was healthy, could have been a better player. There's a lot of concerns there. So TJ was the right pick. Now, Juju. The thing was, there was a huge amount of defensive backs that just started vanishing off the board. And I think everybody thought that's what we were going to do in the second round. Everybody thought we were going to go defensive back. But where are you going to go when so many are gone? Obi was gone. Josh Jones is gone. Chidobe was gone. Just a litany. Quincy Wilson was gone. You can keep going. There were not the same amount of, there wasn't the same quality in the defensive backfield as was expected. And again, the Steelers are not going to overreach, even though we've heard that with James Conner and we've heard that with Dobbs. They're not going to overreach, and they're going to look at what their value is. They're going to look at the players that are left, and Juju Smith-Schuster. First of all, he's only 20 years old, and he's got measurables that I think are interesting. He's never been a blazer, but he's got decent speed. But as we said when he picked, the guy has just mammoth hands, and he is going to be a red zone target that is different than anybody we have right now. And you're right, he's adopting the cult. I mean, the scene of him running into the ocean after he gets his name called is just awesome, man. And he gets it. I mean, he gets it. And how could he not? I mean, Lynn Swan's out there. So I think that the Steelers are going to be lucky that they grabbed him. I think that the fans are going to be thrilled with this guy as time goes on, and are going to forget all about their woes. Oh, we should have picked the defensive back, because we just have to think of what was there, and there wasn't a lot.
No, I think that would have been more of a reach than taking a wide receiver. And like, this has been the question we've been asking all along. How does this pick help you get to the Super Bowl? How does this pick help you beat New England? Well, there wasn't anybody else to throw to besides Antonio Brown. Now, we've hammered that point too in the previous episode, but just to add to yours, beginning of the second round, Green Bay, Kevin King, Budda Baker, a guy the Steelers probably had on their board, gone. Cardinals. Marcus May, another guy they probably had on their board, gone. Marcus Williams, I don't know if they were targeting him or Sidney Jones or Quincy Wilson, but all those guys gone. Justin Evans, another safety, off the board at pick 50 to Tampa, middle of the round. Teez Tabor, cornerback, Detroit Lions. Obi Melanofu goes to the Raiders at safety. Then you had Chidobe Awuzie, Josh Jones go to Dallas and Green Bay, both picks right before Juju Smith-Schuster. You're just taking the names right off of the board, just sliding those magnets or Velcro or tape or whatever they're using there. They're pulling them right off of the board, whiteboard. They're just erasing the guy's name. And you look and you're down, if you're using like an Excel spreadsheet, for example, you're down like 20, maybe into the almost the 30s on your defensive backs. You're looking at the wide receivers and you're still in the top 10 with this kid from USC. It makes too much sense to me to take him. We said he blocks like a freight train. The kid, he wants to be here so bad. You could tell he's excited. I'm excited. I've never been this excited. At first, I had to warm up to this, but Martavis Bryant is none of these guys are reliable outside of Antonio Brown. You had Eli Rogers in a walking boot last year. You had Darius Hayward-Bay hurt. You had Bryant on suspension. Justin Hunter is new and has never lived up to his draft hype. Who else am I missing on here? DeMarcus Ayers and Kobe Hamilton were practice squad players. Ben said the stage might be too big for them in that game. Here you go. Here's another guy that's in there. So if you have everything work out right, worst case scenario, you have an extra body. Oh, Sammy Coates is the other one. And of course, we know how Sammy had ups and downs. Worst case scenario, if it all plays out right, you have a lot of weapons, and if it doesn't, you at least have some insurance for the worst case scenario.
Yeah, and look, Juju was the fourth highest ranked, based on the NFL's profiling, the fourth highest ranked wide receiver prospect in the draft, and so where we got him was a steal. So, as you said, you're talking about instead of the, number 18 cornerback or number 10 safety or what have you, you're talking about the fourth best guy in the draft at a position and a deep position. So how do you skip? I think the more, this is, again, we've harped on this a lot. The more time goes by, the more we're going to like this kid as a pick. We're going to look back on it and say, man, what were we thinking?
And they finally get their corner, and this was a gentleman I had a hard time linking to the Steelers when I was doing all the mocks, but Cam Sutton, someone who appears to be a press coverage player. He can play man. Once again, what does it take to beat New England? Oh, they only play zone. Here you go. Third round, here's a guy. He can play inside or outside. What else? Le'Veon Bell gets hurt. You got D'Angelo Williams out there. Can D'Angelo Williams still go if he was re-signed this year? Flip a coin. We don't know when those players hit their wall, but running backs usually hit it earlier, right after their 30th birthday. James Conner, thunder and lightning with Le'Veon Bell. So now we jump into the third day that we hadn't really talked about too much. And by the way, I'd already mentioned again, if you consider Sutton at the later part of the round and then Conner as a compensatory pick, 41st overall, maybe something like that in that third round, that's practically a fourth rounder. I think good value there. They were grabbing these guys, anticipating, thinking of the value of their picks, like we had shown and talked about the whole chart and values of trading up and down in the draft. They're thinking about how the teams behind them are probably going to try and grab somebody that they have their eyes on. And then it just so happens the only quarterback that I found anywhere acceptable for them to fit into this draft, and I didn't have a problem with this. This was Mandy Moore's pick, Joshua Dobbs. I didn't mind it too much, Brian. I think you may have blew a gasket over there. I'm not sure, but you didn't break stuff as if we would have took Jabril Peppers in the first round like the Cleveland Browns did.
No, I still have issues with this pick. I don't want to say that I'm against this pick. I do think that if there is a pick that they reached on in this draft, it's this one. But that's a questionable statement because it really depends on how teams rate guys. Because here's who went after Dobbs: Brad Kaya, Davis Webb, and not Davis Webb. I'm sorry, Davis Webb went ahead of him. Brad Kaya, Nathan Peterman, and that soon-to-be Hall of Fame quarterback. Bethard, he actually even went ahead of him.
Yeah, Bethard did. I think you're thinking of Mr. Irrelevant, Chad Kelly,
who
was
Chad
the
Kelly.
pick.
That's who I'm trying to find in my head. So, look, would Dobbs have gone ahead of Kaya, Peterman, and Kelly in some of those other teams? Maybe. So if I want to say this is a guy the Steelers wanted as a developmental backup with a potential upside that they don't know about, and they've already addressed all their other positions of need. Once we're here in the 4th round, do I think they could have gone in another direction? I probably think they could have gone in another direction. But how are you going to really fault them? We're talking about now being fairly deep in the draft. And as you said, this is the 30th pick or the 30th pick in the 4th round. That's very close to being a 5th round pick. And I have said all along, if they pick one from the 5th round on, I don't care. So it's on the cusp. I'm not in love with this pick. I honestly would have rather they had taken another edge guy at this point. Maybe, I can't remember whether Ibuka went after this or before this. I think he went in the 4th round to the Rams, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and you know what? Talking about the draft boards and how things play out, and you're looking at Samson Ebukam went about almost 10 picks earlier to the LA Rams at 125, and actually it was 10 picks. It was 135 for Josh Dobbs. I mean, depending on, they already have their running back, they already have their wide receiver, so you see some of those names coming off the board. I think one of the few ones may have been Monte Nicholson going to the Redskins at 123. Could have been on the board if they were looking at safety. Michael Roberts goes to the Lions at 127. That was another gentleman. That was the Toledo tight end. That could have been somebody that they were looking at as well. Those names are off the board. Now what are you looking at? Well, we got this quarterback that's sitting there. And you know what? As far as developing and everything else, I don't think he's a replacement for Ben. We've said that all along. Ben plays out his contract all the way through. You got to make a decision if you're going to play. If Ben's going to retire and Dobbs is going to play for 1 year and then you extend him and he's your guy, or you're already looking at the next quarterback beyond that, I do think Dobbs is the replacement for Landry Jones. Jones will be here this year. Jones will be here next year. Dobbs will be here after that. That's the way I look at it anyways. And if they don't see any type of progress or what they like with Dobbs, because we already know who Landry Jones is. He's not the future. He is definitely not the future. And if they see that with Dobbs too, then they could be a little bit patient. They could see what's going on with Ben, and maybe Ben decides to stay and you have Dobbs ready to exit stage left like Jimmy Garoppolo up in New England. Or maybe they could trade him and get something out of him. Maybe he gets a start or two. Maybe you have a winning record. God forbid, I'm not going to say the other thing that could happen with Ben where Dobbs might come in at some point, but if he shows his stuff like Garoppolo has had the opportunity to do up in New England, the Steelers could get a lot more than a 4th round pick out of that. Unfortunately, though, it doesn't seem like that had worked. That may have been the Cincinnati Bengals plan with A.J. McCarron. So this really is this is kind of speculative. It's a maybe type situation. And if nothing happens, the worst you had was a 4th round pick. We've used one on Duran Grant, okay? I'm not too bent out of shape over it. I think life will go on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's just maybe a linebacker, but I think we're also kind of sleeping on. They still have Tyler Matakevich from last year. They might like the guys they have. So I'm not too bent out of shape about it.
Well, that's the other way to look at this is when you really look at who went right after Dobbs went. And it's a bunch of wide receivers, running backs, defensive tackles, and offensive linemen. Well, they weren't going to draft any of those guys. They already have a wide receiver that they picked up. They already have a running back. They're not double dipping at those positions in this draft. So, at that point you go, well, what else is there? Based on what we wanted, and where we are, maybe this is our guy. So it's not, like I said, I don't love it, but I kind of understand it. And I don't hate it. And I think I wrote about this in our SCU chat room. What bothers me is that there will be a certain population of the nation that now begins the Dobbs is the next Dak Prescott nightmare that we will all have to live through.
Yeah.
And that's probably what bothers me more than the pick itself.
And then the next pick, the 5th round, Brian Allen, a corner from Utah, raw. Measurables right there with another former 5th round pick, Richard Sherman. And I think that blew my mind. In fact, Juju was compared to DeAndre Hopkins, which if that turned out that way, can you imagine? That would be sick. If either one of these turned out as just kind of putting a mirror image next to their measurables, their combine performances and whatnot, Brian Allen, and you know what? This just goes to show you that the Steelers are not sold on Senquez Golson. They are not sold on William Gay. They are definitely not sold on Ross Cockrell, who they just tendered a 4th round pick to. And if they're not going to do a long-term deal, I mean, there's 3 corners right there that they have to plan for long-term. Cody Sensabaugh as well, only on a 2-year deal. Just like the wide receivers, they're just really hedging their bets more than ever because it seems like they've been burned at more than one position through injuries or various other shortcomings. I think this was a decent pick considering where we were in the draft. It wasn't somebody I had on my radar, but I don't mind this one at all.
For me, this is the opposite. This is I can now forgive Joshua Dobbs completely for being picked because I am super high on this pick. This is, in my opinion, this is a perfect late round pick for the Steelers. A kid with just enormous potential upside. You don't know, but you don't know with any of these late round picks. But this is the potential. You watch. This kid's going to make the roster. I'm going to say it right now. He's making the 53. He won't be a practice squad guy. He is going to push somebody out of a job.
I think so.
Whether that happens to be William Gay, and not because he's going to be a slot corner. I don't think he is. I think he's going to be a boundary guy, and he may not earn a starting role. But I bet you this kid makes the 53.
You got me shaking my head over here. You can't see it because I don't do the fancy video stuff like you. But yeah, I totally agree. And then as you look at where everything else starts going and you make the mention, you don't know this 5th round pick. Well, you get into the 6th round, you really don't know, especially when the Steelers announced their pick. It's Colin Holba, the top long snapper. There was it 34 I read? I think it was 34 long snappers in the NFL last year, and only 4 of them have ever had their name called on draft day. And I was scratching my head at this, and then people were like, isn't there anything else at this point? Well, they already double dipped at corner. And I had a very strong feeling that the gentleman that becomes our 7th round pick that I'm going to talk about in a moment, I had a feeling he was going to fall to that spot and they were going to get him. So I didn't feel so bad about this. Well, you could have just signed him as an undrafted free agent. Well, it's not always that simple. You happen to be lucky that he did grow up as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and there may have been a good, solid offer for him to sign as a college free agent after the draft had he gone undrafted. What if he didn't go undrafted? There's the question mark you have to have in your head. Is there some other team that's looking? Look, special teams is important. Do you remember Josh Scobie? Do you remember Zoltan Mesko? That's all I have to say about that. You need a guy who could long snap. The last time, James Harrison was the emergency long snapper.
That's what I was going to say. You don't need to remember Scobie. You don't just remember James Harrison, the long snapper.
Yeah, so you have Boswell and Barry, but somebody has to get him the ball, okay? Everyone's saying replace Ben, find another quarterback. Everyone's saying James Harrison can't play forever. He's up there in years. Well, who's the other guy that's won all of these Super Bowl rings as well with them? Greg Warren, the current long snapper, year-to-year deal. This may have been a thing where they paid Greg, and Greg, thank you very much. You could now go off into the sunset. We're going to see how training camp ends up going, because I have a feeling they had that inclination that Greg Warren could be nearing the end, or maybe he's just one of these other guys that's like, you know what? I've had a long, healthy career. I've made enough money. so long, guys. Thank you. You know what? Thank you for all of the great years. Thank you for the time in Pittsburgh. And
absolutely.
So this is the other guy you're looking at. You're looking at TJ Watt there for Harrison. You're looking at Joshua Dobbs potentially there for Ben. And now you have Colin Holba here as the long snapper. So as much as I was puzzled, and I'm looking up at the screen, I'm eating lunch at that point, and I'm looking at this, and I'm like, a long snapper? Well, you look at all the other names that are around on here. I mean, Brad Kaya goes. I mean, it's not like you said, they got their wide receiver already. They got their edge rusher already. They got 2 corners already. What else is there to really burn this draft pick on? And they got James Conner too. So they fulfilled their needs. Here's another one that could be a need. Let's take the guy and guarantee that we have him.
Yeah, we don't know. I mean, here's the thing. Do we know whether Greg Warren stepped up to them and said, look, you need to find somebody to take my place that I can, introduce to the NFL game, because this is it. I'm done after this year. We don't know the answers. Something will come out as time goes by that will help explain this pick. But that being said, the other thing is, when you go back and you look at this kid as a long snapper, if you're watching his tape, right? And it's not easy to find tape on a long snapper, trust me. But, if you can find some highlights of this guy snapping the ball, which luckily, I mean, Louisville has enough tape online that you can find some. If you weren't paying attention, you'd get the idea, and I did when I first saw this, that everything he does is off. Okay? I'm like, geez, that guy's not that accurate. But then you go and find out that the punter that Louisville had, right, wants the ball in a very specific place, which is high into the right or left. I don't remember. And he hits it every time. The guy is actually uncannily accurate with snapping the ball. And that and on top of Colbert's comments about how most college long snappers are not suited to the pro game because they're much more protected in college, and they end up being these really light guys who can't handle the burden of long snapping in the NFL. And when you see one, if this kid is the long snapper for the Steelers for the next 10 to 12 years, this is a fantastic pick.
Yeah, there's also another difference with the college and pro rules. At least one of them is that the long snapper, as far as in coverage, is permitted to start running immediately after snapping the ball, whereas in the pros, they have to wait until the ball is kicked before they can begin to move. So that's another thing when it comes to coverage. I mean, it seems silly, but I mean, hey, Greg Warren recovered a fumble last season, so we got to say his name on the podcast. We got to say it in articles. We got to use some photos. It doesn't happen too often. He is the forgotten man out there, and that's because he does an excellent job at what he does, and that's just snapping the football. Seems silly, but it's still a necessity, and I think just having the foresight to even imagine this. They scouted a long snapper. That's how detailed the Steelers' war room is. Another guy they double dip on, 7th round, Western Michigan's Keon Adams. Eric Herman here had an opportunity to interview him. He seems like another fun character who's going to fit right in. Another upside type pick, but someone that definitely projects from moving from a defensive end to outside linebacker in a 3-4 system. And I do believe he's one that's going to be on the cusp of a roster spot, if for anything, and we're talking roster spots already, but if anything, we don't have enough outside linebackers. There's not enough depth there, but he could be someone that sticks with maybe a practice squad for a bit of time, gets called up to the roster if there's any type of injuries or anything else that happens. And if he happens to pan out, great. If not, like you said, we're throwing darts at a board, because, I mean, literally, he's number 248. Mr. Irrelevant Chad Kelly goes at 253. So that's how deep we are in the draft with Keon Adams.
Yeah, the nice thing about Adams, he has great feet. All right, his feet are light, right, and so he doesn't make a lot of falses out of his stance. He doesn't, make a lot of false steps when he's getting into his rushing. I think he is the ideal kind of defensive tackle that transitions to, a 3-4 outside linebacker. But he's not real big. And, on his NFL profile, he's Arthur Moats. That's who they say. And the funny thing is, that may be who he replaces on the roster is Arthur Moats. If he makes the roster, it's really, it won't surprise me if he makes the 53. It won't surprise me if he's on the practice squad. I think ideally they look at this guy, and the fear is that he absolutely blows up in training camp, right? He's doing fantastic because he's got that kind of motor and that energy, and he's driven, right? We get that. You can get that out of what you read in Eric's article. But if he does that, they may be afraid to put him on the practice squad, because
Exactly.
You don't want to lose that guy. And so that's when it starts to come down as to what are we doing? Where are we going to put him? We need him to be in a position that we can use him as depth, because there's no free spots on the 53. There's not you can't just throw somebody on there for the fun of it. They've got to be able to provide some kind of depth. And I don't see them keeping 6 outside linebackers, which they'd have to do if they kept both him and Moats.
No, and I agree with that, and I hate to get into roster projections so early, but my just kind of gut feeling is this is someone like almost like they didn't draft B.J. Finney, but I mean, even for DeMarcus Ayers, who was a 7th-round pick last year, I mean, there's some incentive to stick around. You're going to lose some guys like they did with Travis Feeney. I'm not exactly sure Travis Feeney was necessarily a fit for the Steelers scheme. It was one of those scratch-your-head type picks last year anyways. So, but overall, I'm pleased with it. I thought he would be there. I was more than taken away that Ibukum went so high. In fact, I think I had mentioned a sleeper pick with Avery Moss, the other guy at Youngstown State besides Derek Rivers. He went in the 5th round to the New York Giants. And so that was before the Steelers got the pick. So even some of these guys that they may have attended pro days or looked at, I mean, you're getting to slim pickings. You're really counting on some of your interviews. You're counting on your homework. They brought in a few other undrafted players that they signed, like Scott Orndorff, the tight end from Pitt. I'm thinking of I'm trying to think of the linebacker's name now, and now it's escaped me.
The guy from Louisville, Keith Kelsey.
Yes, Keith Kelsey. I mean, these guys, they have a shot at maybe making an impact as well. So, but we're going to talk about that in the coming weeks because we can't do it all today. And to be completely honest, we don't want to burn our batteries out again. So I think we're going to leave it there. We had a nice lengthy discussion about the draft. I don't want to put a grade on it because I'll probably be wrong no matter if I give it an A or an F. So it really doesn't matter. There's going to be the people that say, tell me why they took a long snapper. Tell me why they took a wide receiver. Well, we're going to see why, because they're going to kick off and play football here in a few months. Training camp, all of these organized workouts, all these things are going to fire up, and then we're going to get to see how this completely pans out, and hopefully, and the track record speaks for itself, that they get it right once again. I think a few of these guys are definitely starter quality. You have Watt, you have Smith-Schuster, you have James Conner is going to have to sit behind Lev Bell, of course, but he's going to be a nice 1-2 punch and some like kind of a relief guy. Cameron Sutton and Brian Allen, they could also be guys who end up starting. And of course, Colin Holba. What else can you say about that?
There you go.
So, folks, we will leave it at that. So, as I always say, until next time, be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later. Tell everyone hello, Brian. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground Podcast. I am your host, Joe Kuzma, and joined once again by my co-host, Brian, who wrote all of the day 3 that seems like it just lasted forever.